So, I don't know if you guys know this, but Nintendo recently dropped a bombshell in the form of a ridiculous amount of Smash Bros. News, including a 40-minute long direct dedicated to just Smash Bros. And over 300 screenshots. And because it's so large, it would be impossible for us to cover it all at once in a timely manner. So instead, we'll be breaking them up into smaller analyses. And we've already started with our analysis on how Ground Ninja will work, so make sure to give that a watch if you haven't already. And we'll have upcoming ones for the rest of the characters, stages, items, and more. But now it's time to cover the overall biggest secrets of the Direct, including a few other details that wouldn't fit anywhere else. So let's not waste any more time and get right to it. Okay, analysis machine, don't fail me now. So obviously, the game's clearly been polished a lot more since we first saw it at E3, and part of that is a much greater emphasis on visual indicators that highlight what's happening on screen, such as this black and red electric bolt that appears when landing a powerful attack on a weakened opponent, basically guaranteeing a KO. And speaking of KOs, the character that scored it will now glow immediately after, which should make it just a little more obvious as to who exactly landed the last hit and scored the point. Another new visual addition are alternative character appearances, as in more than one. Now we already knew about the male version of the Wii Fit trainer, but we now know that Lil Mac will have a wireframe version too, as an homage to his appearance in the arcade game Super Punch-Out! And we think this could open the floodgates to plenty of other alternative appearances. And we may already know of at least one more, because Super Smash Bros. Brawl actually had a single alternative costume too, in the form of an old school looking Wario. Well, that is once Wario is confirmed to be back in the game, of course. And though we've mentioned it before, we wouldn't be surprised if the villager had a female version too, just like in the Animal Crossing games. Now something else that's interesting about that wireframe scene is the camera angle. Now of course they did this for the trailer to mimic the appearance of Super Punch-Out!, and while it could have just been made for the trailer, we think it's probably hinting at something more, particularly as we saw a very similar camera angle in the Beetle item scene. So we think that, much like how we suspected the scenes in the Mario Kart 8 trailer were from the new Mario Kart TV mode, that these clips might be showing off the game's expanded replay feature. Now, replays were also in Brawl, but the camera angles are a lot more limited than what's shown here, which now allow you to see far more of the background. In fact, you can see much more of the background than you would ever be able to in a normal Smash Bros. Match. I mean, would they really bother adding that much detail just for a trailer? Alright, that's enough about camera angles. Now, both the direct and the new screenshots show off a ton of stages that we already knew about, that we'll be covering far more in our upcoming stage analysis. But they also showed off one completely new one that's never been seen before, a balloon fight stage for the 3DS version. And it's doing something no Smash Bros. Game has done before, allowing you to go well beyond the left and right borders of the screen. Well, sort of, because they instantly teleport you to the other side of the screen, just like in Balloon Fight. Which could mean that you may only be able to KO opponents either off the top of the screen or by dunking them into the lake below. Although there is a possibility off-screen KOs could still be present, similar to how you can't KO yourself off the top of the screen in most of the other Smash Bros. Games. And speaking of KOs, we can see everyone's favorite fish friend is back too, and it appears he'll function just like in the original game, where he'll lunge out at any nearby opponents if they get too close to his location. But since he's underwater, you won't be able to tell where exactly he is either. And then there are the flipper obstacles. Now in both the original game and their reappearance in Smash Bros. Melee as an item, touching one would cause it to spin around for a short time, tossing anyone that touches it into the air. And it appears to function much the same here too, as we can see the top right one become active as Peach passes by. Although oddly, it doesn't immediately send her flying, so either she happened to get out of the way in time, or maybe they won't affect the player that activated them, kind of like the checkpoints at Sonic Stage in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And even more curious is the fact that Peach passes right by a second flipper, and yet that one doesn't start to spin. So it could mean that the hitboxes on the flippers is actually smaller than their appearance. Either that, or their spinning is actually completely random, though we kind of doubt that one. So that covers it for the new stage, but the footage and screenshots also reveal a few interesting details about some of the stages we already know about, such as the fact that one picture confirms that cats will be appearing in the Nintendog stage, which we now know is called the Living Room. And we also get our first real good look at the new Find Me stage, although at first, there doesn't really seem to be that much to say about it. I mean, we really only see two platforms separated by a short gap. But we think that, given how the caged Mii appears to be a focal point of the stage, that there very well could be a third platform to the left, which would place the Mii closer to the center of the arena. And speaking of that Mii, keep a close eye on them, because the character actually changes completely between both of the clips here. So this could mean one of a few different things. One, maybe that the caged Mii is randomly selected at the start of the match, and maybe the game even pulls them directly from your 3DS's own Miiverse Plaza, which would be pretty cool. But another idea we have is, what if you can actually free those Miis, and perhaps they'll launch a magic attack in accordance to their shirt color, which would then influence the battle in some way, just like in the Find Me game. And that might just be how the Dark Lord factors into all this, who we're guessing is going to be a boss character along the lines of the Yellow Devil that Sakurai discussed in the Direct. So maybe you free the Mii after beating the boss, again just like in Find Me. After all, we already know that being the one to get the last hit in on the Yellow Devil boss rewards you in some way, so it makes perfect sense for the same thing to happen here too. And that might just apply to every boss. Now speaking of boss characters, Sakurai even hinted at one more during the Direct, with the Shadow Ripley appearing in the Power Sphere stage as he was saying there'd be more bosses in the game. But it is a little suspicious that he only showed his Shadow, and a lot of people are wondering why. Some people have suggested that this boss could actually be Meta Ridley, perhaps leaving Ridley left to be unveiled as a playable character. But as it turns out, it's not only a shadow that we can see, because if we freeze the clip in a couple of different places, we can see what appears to be part of his body pass right in front of the camera. And from what we can tell, it appears to be based on Ridley's Other M appearance, as opposed to Meta Ridley. Which makes sense because only Ridley appeared in Other M, which is the game that the level shown here, Pyrosphere, is based on. But of course, Sakurai could just be toying with us all. After all, he never explicitly states that Ridley is a boss character. His animations do seem to be almost a little too uneventful for a boss character. But realistically speaking, Ridley probably is a boss character. But there's still hope. Now, another stage that we gotta see a lot more of is the Wii U Animal Crossing stage, now called Town and City. And for good reason, as we can see that the platform you're fighting on will actually fly between the two locations throughout the match, which is pretty cool and unexpected. But did you catch the fact that the spectators in the background are actually waiting at a bus stop, as indicated by the sign here? And it seems that the bus stop actually rises from the ground in order to take in such a spectacle. And we can even see it drop away too. And yes, it's actually dropping as opposed to the main stage rising, as the background doesn't change. So we think that the main stage might just change locations every time the bus comes to pick up or drop off the passengers, as we can see the platform chasing after the bus in this scene. Oh, and based on the different times of day we can now see, it seems likely that this stage, like Smashville and Miiverse, will use a Wii U's internal clock to determine the time of day, which is a cool touch. Finally, we get to see even more of the Mario 3D Land stage in action. And it confirms what we already suspected, that you'll be able to get items from the question blocks here. In addition, the donut lift platforms will predictably drop when you stand on them, just like in the main Mario games. But interestingly, it looks like that even non-playable characters might weigh them down too, as demonstrated here by Mega Man's Rush Coil move, where the robotic dog causes the platform to drop. Is it because the game considers him a character, or maybe it could mean items of all kinds might affect the platforms too? Or maybe only those dropped by a character as part of their moveset, such as Sonic Spring. Now, another new stage detail that Sakurai revealed is the fact that many of them will have an alternate Final Destination form. In other words, a flat platformless version with no stage hazards. Now, based on Sakurai's comments, it seemed that these alternate versions might only be available to those playing in Smash Bros. 4 Glory mode, which is an online mode that has no items or seemingly random elements at all. But one of the clips shows Rosalina using her final smash on the Mario Galaxy Final Destination stage, which is something that should be impossible to do in 4 Glory mode. Which basically means that the Final Destination versions of all these stages will be freely available for anyone to play and won't be mode specific. And don't you worry, the normal Final Destination stage is back too, although it might be hiding an interesting detail that we'll get back to shortly. And speaking of things that are back, so are a bunch of past fighters too. Now, we're not going to delve into them too deeply here, because they'll be getting their very own analysis. But it seems like these old dogs can in fact learn some new tricks, and I wanted to point just a few of them out. Such as DK's new rolling dash attack, taken right from the Donkey Kong Country series. And while it was a pretty great offensive move in those games, we have no idea how effective it might be here. Then there's Link, who's received a new jumping sword dash attack from Ocarina of Time. His recovery has also been beefed up considerably, giving him more vertical distance. And his back roll's been changed to a backflip too. Neat. And while we're on the topic of Links, check out what young Link does here. He actually runs down the Yellow Devil while facing the ground, as if he were a wall. Is this a new move that perhaps him and other characters might be able to perform? Maybe it's related to the whole wall jumping thing, which is something that Toon Link could do in Brawl. Or is it something special about the Yellow Devil himself? And finally, check out Luigi's new flutter jump, just like he does in many of his platforming appearances. It's a nice touch. And there's lots of other little character tweaks too, but again, we'll be covering those later. Now, we also learned about a ton of new items, assist trophies, and Pokemon in the Direct. And as with the stages, we'll be saving an in-depth breakdown of each of them for a later time. Particularly as most of them are pretty self-explanatory. But one of the clips just barely gives us a look at what we think could be a pretty interesting item. The blue shell from Mario Kart. If we watch the clip closely, we can see it's not only hovering above Mario, but following his movements perfectly. But it's not long before the shell flies high into the air, before attempting to drop onto Mario's spikes first. Ouch! Luckily for Mario, he narrowly avoids being impaled by air dodging. So what's going on here? Well, as you probably know, in the Mario Kart games, the blue shell always targets whoever's in the lead. And we think that could be the case here too, perhaps explaining why it's following Mario so closely. But would it be based on the overall score, or just whoever has the lowest amount of damage at that point? Regardless, we think there's a chance that the blue shell could dynamically change its target, which would explain why it takes so long for it to actually attack. And based on that same delay, we wonder if the person being targeted might actually be able to change the blue shell's target. If not by purposely trying to get out of the lead, then maybe by landing a hit on another player. Oh, and check this out. It appears that the blue shell begins its attack the moment that Mario gets hit by Sonic's laser blast here. So could taking damage be what finally triggers its attack? Well, we do see Mario taking damage at the very start of the clip, without activating the blue shell. So maybe it's based on how many hits, or how much total damage you've taken. There's a lot of possibilities here. And when it finally does attack, it seems like the blue shell launches off screen in an effort to conceal where exactly it's going to land. A little similar to the Warp Star. Sneaky! Now, another new item that we learned about is the Master Ball, which Sakurai stated will contain only rare and legendary Pokemon, which suggested that the normal Pokeball, which is also returning, will only contain more common Pokemon. However, earlier in the Direct, we see Palkia, the legendary Pokemon, popping out of a normal Pokeball. Huh. So it seems that Pokeballs will function much as they always have, containing any kind of Pokemon, including rare and legendaries, whereas Master Balls will only have rare and legendaries. Now speaking of Pokemon, we get a look at a ton of new and returning Pokemon in both the direct and all the screenshots. And again, we'll be breaking them all down later too. But there are hints at a few more Pokemon not directly shown in action. Because if we take a look at the Grodd Ninja trailer, it opens with a ton of Pokeballs flying through the air releasing their Pokemon. But if we slow down the clip, we can actually see who all those Pokemon are. Now some of them we already knew would be in the game, such as Deoxys, who was revealed a few weeks ago, and Eevee, who was shown earlier in the direct. But there are even more revealed here who haven't been shown elsewhere. But for completion's sake, we'll go down the entire line. So we have Dedenne, Bellossom, Chespin, Snivy, Oshawott, Goldeen, Staryu, Eevee, Togepi, Fletchling in the back here, Swirlix, Metagross, Latias, Darkrai, Meowth, Electrode, Palkia, Entei, Gardevoir, Kyogre, Gogurt the Go-Goat, Zoroark, Giratina, Snorlax, Kyurem, Mew in the back, Lugia, Suiakun, Deoxys, Latias, Meloetta, Keldeo, Victini, Pupa, Fennekin, and Inkay. Woo! So that's a lot of Pokemon. Now beyond all of this, a recent batch of screenshots also revealed a few new items that haven't been shown anywhere else. So let's take a quick look at some of the biggest ones. First up is the Tanuki tail, but we have no idea how it'll work. Maybe your character will whip his tail each time he turns around, making him a roaming hazard. Or maybe it can assist with your recovery, either allowing you to glide or fly for a brief time. Then there's a boomerang from Super Mario 3D Land, which we're guessing may be good for multiple uses, like its recent Mario Kart 8 appearance. But will it just be used for inflicting damage, or can it be used to bring enemies or items right to you? Next up is the Drill Arm from Kid Icarus Uprising, which is a projectile-based weapon. Now, if it works anything like it does in Kid Icarus Uprising, they might hone in on one of your opponents and do ongoing damage. And based on the fact that Diddy continues to hold the weapon afterward, it seems he may still be able to use the base as a projectile by throwing it. Then we have the Killer Eye, a movable turret also from Kid Icarus Uprising. So we're guessing this is an item you'll be able to pick up and place wherever you like, so as to have it mow down anyone that crosses its line of sight. Literally, it is an eye after all. But perhaps most interesting of all is this item, the special flag that's appeared in several Namco games, such as Rally X, Galaxian, and even Star Fox Assault. But what could it be used for? Maybe it summons characters from those old school games. Well, based on these next few screenshots, it seems that just might be the case, as we can see some aliens from Galaxian either attacking or abducting your opponents. Now the curious thing about the special flag and the aliens is that they both have nothing to do with any of the characters in this game, but both of those things are from games made by Namco, who's helping to develop the new Smash Bros. Game. So could this hint at some more Namco inclusions? Well, do you remember that Final Destination thing that I said we'd get back to eventually? Now's the time. So the new Final Destination is a pretty cool looking stage, what with the clashing red and blue colors and overall fierce appearance. But does it remind you of anything? Like say a combination of the Soul Edge and Soul Calibur swords from Soul Calibur, which is a game also made by Namco. Based on all these Namco references, you wouldn't be surprised to see one of their characters here too. And speaking of characters, a few of the returning items and other elements might hint at a few more returnees. Take Mr. Saturn and the Franklin badge for example, both from Earthbound, which suggests either Ness or Lucas could be returning, which isn't really a huge surprise, but it's good to know regardless. Then there's a polar bear enemy from Ice Climber that can be found in Smash Run mode, which could mean that the Ice Climbers will be back too. Same thing with the return of the Samurai Goro assist trophy from F-Zero, hinting that Captain Falcon's probably back as well. And speaking of assist trophies, the Nintendo Direct footage showed a bunch of them off, but there are just a few small details about some of them that you might have missed. Take the fruit tossing Isabelle here, because it looks like she's tossing the fruit at a specific player, perhaps the one who released her from the assist trophy. And look, you don't even need to pick up the fruit to gain its benefits, as it's absorbed automatically. Also, did you catch that she actually dodges out of the way of an attack here? Aw, Isabelle, can you get any cuter? Then there's Midna, who at first appears she may use her giant hand to do some swipe attacks. But if you freeze the clip right here, we can see a single frame where it appears she may have actually grabbed Kirby and is throwing him instead. And then there's a Color TV 15 where the ball bounces inflict damage and knock the player back. But if you touch the paddles, although they will reflect you back too, they'll do so without inflicting any damage. Okay, we're almost done here, but there's still just a few final details I wanted to point out. Such as the fact that if you freeze this clip here, we can see a piece of the Dragoon, suggesting that item is built back and functions much like before. And then there's a couple of odd visual things we noticed in the footage. First, check out the top left corner of this clip here. See the pink text there? Looks like someone forgot to turn off the debug menu of their in-development Smash Bros. Game. And check out this 3D land stage clip. Right after the block gets hit, it moves way over here for a single frame. That's kind of weird. Now this next one isn't a mistake, but it is something interesting. In the Yellow Devil sequence, we can see there are 5 player icons on the screen, 2 of which are for player 2. Now this makes sense given that we know whoever gets a final hit on Yellow Devil earns a reward for doing so. In this case, Yellow Devil exploding, harming everyone but Mario, and it seems the second player icon simply visually denotes that. But there's something even more curious here. After the flashing in this scene, Mega Man's player indicator changes to display his damage counter instead. That's weird. Could that be a new option, or something they can toggle in-game? Finally, there's one fan theory that's been making the rounds, so we thought we'd mention it here too. And it purports that the somewhat odd trophy sections of the Smash Bros. Direct may actually be hinting at even more newcomers. Specifically, that Tiki from Fire Emblem can mean that a new character from that same series might appear, like Crumb. And using that same logic, Fi from Zelda Skyward Sword could hint at another Zelda character, like either Girahim or Demise, perhaps to replace Ganondorf. Then there's Pseudo Palutena, who of course could relate to Palutena from Kid Icarus, and lending credence to this is the fact that Pit now has a brand new Final Smash, replacing the Palutena one he had originally, which would free her up to be a character of her own. And finally, there's King Key Hunter from Metroid, who would tie back into the whole Ridley thing. Yeah, it's an interesting idea, but then again, we do know how Sakurai loves his mind games. And with that, we're done covering everything we could dig up on Super Smash Bros. Wii U and 3DS. Wait a second. No, we're not. In fact, there's still lots more to cover. So make sure to stay tuned for even more Smash Bros. Analysis videos coming up that will cover different aspects of the game. And as always, please let us know what you've discovered in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and make sure to stay tuned to GameXplain.com for more Smash Bros. Wii U and 3DS and other things gaming too.